Okay, first of all, I have to ask you your gender. Yes.
Yeah,
Your
that's
age.
female.
Yeah, your age, your educational background, and your work experience, if you have any.
Of course. All right, so as you can hear, I'm female, 24 years old. I'm currently doing my master's at Trinity College Dublin in supply chain management or operations and supply chain management. And what else did you ask for?
Yes, so you said you've worked in supply management. Your educational
Exactly.
background, you're doing master's degree right now in
hmm
supply chain management as well.
Operations and supply chain management.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Also, I need to ask you about your personal attitude towards using technology in your daily life, just in general. How do you feel about using technology?
I think I feel quite comfortable as I'm using technology on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so I mean, it's part of our generation.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Okay, so are you currently employed?
I'm not employed yet, but
Mm-hmm.
I have a contract, so I got an offer from a company.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Um, yeah. What kind of career preferences do you have and expectations? What kind of career, yeah, in terms of
Okay, so
industry, positions?
yeah, so basically, as I studied operations and supply chain management, I also want to find a position in this area. And indeed, I found an internship as a supply chain in the supply chain management area.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, also I want to develop further in that position after a manager position in this field, which can be
Mm-hmm.
operations and supply chain management. So all
Mm-hmm.
different areas of this industry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. So you told me that you've applied for two positions recently through
hmm
digital recruitment. Could you please
Yeah.
describe both of those experiences only at the
Yeah.
application stage? So in terms
Okay.
of your CV, yeah.
Yeah. So basically, the process in Dublin was way more complicated, as I had to go through, I think, four different steps. First of all, I had to send my CV as well as a sort of a motivation letter, which was more answering two specific questions. The second step, yeah, and fill in all my personal information as well. And the second step was a logical or numeric test online.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the third one was a video interview where I was supposed to answer a couple of questions, and I had like 3 minutes to answer those questions. So I was just talking to the computer, and the final one was actually supposed to be on site, but in this case, I just had to prepare a case study and present the case study over the internet. And then there were some competency-based questions, situation questions, whatever. And yeah, that's it. And the other one here in Italy was quite different. So it was just like one single interview which also was supposed to be on site, but we had to change that. And it was like only a personal conversation. Um, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
less complex, and that's it.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, I'll just interrupt you here. So for now, we're only going to focus on you filling out the application form,
Yeah.
you sending your CV. So we'll focus on the interviews and any of the assessments that you've had a little bit later.
hmm
So going back to those two positions, could you let me know, for the purposes of this interview, what the companies were and what the positions were exactly?
Of course.
Mm-hmm.
So in Dublin, it was a position, like it was a traineeship in the field of operations management.
Mm-hmm.
The company was Kerry Food, so it's a food and nutrition company.
Mm-hmm.
And on the other hand, the company in Italy is called Dr. Shea, and it's also in the food industry as well.
Mm-hmm. Was it for the
And the
same position? Mm-hmm.
It was it was for the position like just a supply chain management, and this one is an internship. Oh, yeah.
So the Dublin one was an internship, and then the Italian one was
The other way
internship.
around. So
Oh.
yeah, Dublin was a traineeship, and Italy was an internship.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you. So traineeship would be an entry-level position, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. So I think you've mentioned that for the one in Dublin, you had to send your CV and then also send a motivational letter.
Yeah.
Yep. Did you have to provide them with anything else on top of that at the application stage?
Sorry, with a what?
Did you have to provide them with anything else at the application stage?
No, like the first step was just, I mean, of course, some personal information. But despite that, it was simply the CV and this sort of motivation that, but it was more focused. So they just gave me 2 specific questions which I had to answer.
Okay. And
Yeah.
for the Italian company, it was CV and something else?
Yeah, CV and the motivation letter.
Oh, so basically the same requirements for the 2 companies.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, perfect. How did you prepare for your applications? What I mean by that is, for instance, some people say that they will make sure that they tailor their CV to the job requirements, or they will do something else.
I mean, of course, I tailored my CV, especially for these positions, as I study in this field as well. Other than that, if we're talking only about the first step, I would say, of course, like for each company, I write a new motivational letter, as I don't like to use the same one several times. So I just adapted based on the company. But other than that, I would say it was quite similar, as both positions are in the same field. So yeah.
So you said you tailored your information, both the letters and the CV, based on the company. Where did you derive that information about the companies from? So what
Online.
sources did you use?
Okay, I think in the first place I used the company's website, of course.
For Dublin company?
For both. So for both companies, I used their own website. I did my research. Also, I mean, I did the research with the internet, typing in some, just researching also the news about these companies, and of course, I also had some personal contacts. So I ask also for some insights from people that work there. And especially for Dublin, I remember I contacted. Exactly. I watched a video on YouTube about the company, about the traineeships in Dublin, and I contacted a person that I saw in the video, as she was hired for the same position. So I asked her for some recommendation and about her experience.
Oh, that's a good tip. That's a good advice. Okay, perfect. Did you find that the job descriptions posted by the companies were very helpful in terms of tailoring the information on your CV?
So there's a big difference, because for Dublin, it was very clear what are the requirements, what they're expecting from you. It was clearly like the description was very clear, while the one for Italy, there was just a job description. There was no job description. It was just written that they're searching for an intern for the field of supply chain management, but there was no further information. That's why they provided me with any further details during the interview.
Okay, thank you. What did you expect from the application process at its initial stage? So sending your CV and motivational letter, and were those expectations met in terms of 3 factors? So communication, feedback, ease of use, like how easy the websites were to use, how easy it was to write the letters, stuff like that.
Okay. I mean, there were no problems at all for both companies. Also, their application tool was easy to use. I got feedback from Dublin quite soon, while for the company Italy it took a while. So I had to contact them again, and they came back to me and just had trouble or were just busy, so less organized because it's Italy.
Okay.
but
I see.
yeah, but
So,
other than that, in terms of communication, it was fine. Yeah.
so mostly your expectations were met for both of the companies in terms
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
how easy the websites were to use.
Yeah.
Although for the Italian company, the expectations were that it would take them faster to respond and they weren't as communicative as you would like them to be.
Exactly.
Okay, perfect. um, Also, what do you feel like are the differences between traditional ways of applying, so for example, through referrals, job board,
Mhm.
newspapers, and the ways that you applied through?
Um, okay.
Excluding interviews, just the application.
Yeah. Just to, I don't really I cannot say what's the difference because I would
Uh-huh.
always apply online mostly. I mean, of course, if you have a direct contact, you would get in touch differently, and eventually one of your networking persons would send your CV to the company, or forward your CV.
Mm-hmm.
But in this case, I think it was a very traditional way to
Mm-hmm.
apply
Mm-hmm.
for a company. So nothing special, I guess.
Okay, that's perfectly
Or I don't know
fine.
if I answered the yeah.
No, that's fine. Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
What were your feelings about the companies after you applied and heard back from them? Again, excluding the interviews. Were the ways they communicated with you or anything at all about the experience? Did anything
It was a
affect
good
your perception?
experience. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it was a good experience. Especially for the company in Italy. I mean, the first they didn't reply, but as I texted them again, they called me immediately and they told me that they would love to get to know me in person. And so we established the first interview, and everything went quite quick because if you
Mm-hmm.
call, you just can discuss everything immediately.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, the experience with the other interview in Dublin was also quite good. They came back to me um, in a decent time, I would say, so I didn't have to wait too long. And they were, or at least if it took longer, they informed you
Mm-hmm.
about the delay and why is that. So yeah, it went perfectly for both processes.
Okay, you said decent time. What would be a decent time to respond to someone in your opinion?
Um, yeah, in like 1 week is for
Mm-hmm.
me a decent time. So I think um, also 2 weeks. It depends how
Mm-hmm.
urgent I'm seeking for a job. I mean, but at the
Mm-hmm.
time where I applied, it was not that urgent because it was, I guess, in February.
Mm-hmm.
So I still had a couple of months ahead to find a job. So
Yeah.
um,
How much time
it
did it
was not
take?
pressing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How much time did it take for the Dublin company to respond as opposed to the Italian company? I know you had to reach out to them on your own.
Exactly. So I think I applied in February,
Mm-hmm.
and I guess 1 month later they didn't reply. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's when
Yeah.
I decided, okay, I'm gonna approach them again to
Mm-hmm.
make sure they got um
Application.
my application exactly. And
Mm-hmm.
indeed I contacted uh, another person that was working there, asking if she could get some information if they just are not interested or if there are any other
Mm-hmm.
issues, and then they came back to me the next day.
Mm-hmm. And the
Yeah.
company in Dublin?
I think they replied quite fast, I guess after 2 or 3 days. So I
Oh.
was surprised how fast
Mm-hmm.
they were. Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
So.
Overall, how did you feel about the whole, not the whole, the application processes for to
Hmm.
companies uh, in terms of information accuracy of the job
Hmm.
descriptions, in
Hmm.
terms of data privacy concerns, if you had any?
Yeah. Okay. So in terms of data privacy, I felt comfortable with both.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, because if you apply for a job, you have to reveal some of your data, which is quite normal,
Mm-hmm.
and you would do it on a daily basis also if you sign up for different apps. So
Mm-hmm.
there was no problem for me. And in view of the what was the second one?
The second one was information accuracy of the job
Uh,
description.
exactly, in view of the information accuracy of the job description, as I already mentioned before, I didn't have much job description for the application in Italy. That's why I was fine with it. So I cannot say if the description was met or
Uh-huh.
not. And for the application in Dublin, it was quite detailed. So uh, for some points, they couldn't give me accurate information because the role would change from time to time and depending on where which position is open at the time. They just informed you about what would be what are the requirements and what is the position like, and but they also emphasized that it might eventually change. So I was
Mm-hmm.
prepared for that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So they were very transparent from the beginning.
Yeah, very transparent.
Mm-hmm. Did the fact that the Italian company didn't really have much of a job description,
Yeah,
and the fact that the Dublin company kind of the Dublin company was it? No,
yeah.
the Italian company wasn't really on point with the communication. Did that sort of decrease your experience in terms of its positivity, make it a little bit more negative?
um to be honest, not really, but I think the reason for that is that I have some friends working there, and I heard a lot of like a lot
Um,
of good things about the company. So I knew
mm-hmm,
it's an interesting, um, trendy company in my home country because I'm from
mm-hmm,
Italy.
mm-hmm,
So it was still attractive for me, and the fact that I mean, it happens. I know they are not. I mean, they're an international company, but probably they don't have this standardized processes as a company or a traditional company as Carry Group has, and
mm-hmm,
therefore it can happen that you oversee an application and they came back to me as soon as this one person informed them. So
mm-hmm,
that was not a problem for me at all. And also in terms of the job description, it was not perfectly described, um, but I mean, I knew it was an internship, so in an internship you would always have kind of a rotating program and get an insight in the different areas of this field,
mm-hmm.
and yeah, so
So
that was not a
you're
problem for me.
Yeah, perfect. I know you touched upon how easy to use were all of the tools that you used during the application process, and I think you've mentioned that it was relatively straightforward. Could you please
Yeah.
just elaborate on that and evaluate the tools used in the process in terms of like, dislike, easy to use,
Okay.
convenience? Mm-hmm.
um, I think I'm not sure if I remember perfectly, but I think both were over a job application portal.
Uh-huh.
So I mean, it's quite simple. You just need to upload your CV,
Mm-hmm.
um, insert your personal details, attach. For the one, I attached my motivation letter. For the other one, I had to type in a box where there
Mm-hmm.
were limited words for both questions. And then just upload it or send it. So it was quite easy. And if I had to compare them, I couldn't say which one was easier. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it was fine.
Both of the portals were directly through the company websites.
To the company websites, yes.
Mm-hmm. So it wasn't like a one-click sort of LinkedIn CV sort of application.
No, it was not a one-click one. So
Mm-hmm.
you had traditional like upload everything
Mm-hmm.
um,
Mm-hmm.
by hand or
Do you feel
manually.
like LinkedIn one-click sort of application would be even more convenient, or
It is convenient. It is fast. I thought so, but I had the feeling whenever I applied over this and never got nobody responded.
yeah.
So maybe it was a coincidence, or maybe it's just because I think more people would apply to such a position because it's not. Yeah, you don't struggle much with the application. You just have to click one button and they will forward your LinkedIn details, and that's it.
Mm,
But on the other
mhm.
hand, the company has less information about you and probably more application. That's why could be a reason why it's not that how you say why it doesn't show that good results.
That's a very good point, actually. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
How could companies improve your experience with applications at the early stages
At the
digitally?
early stage, yeah, digitally, I think it's even if it takes a while until they can give you feedback,
Hmm.
um, it's for the person that applies, it's um, nice to get some information, even if it takes longer. Just like drop them a standardized email saying it will take longer, please be patient, whatever.
Yeah.
And then as long as it's transparent and they keep informing you, you know they are on it and they're working on it. So I think
Mm-hmm.
that's an important point.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, on the other hand, you expect also feedback within 1-2 weeks. Yeah, depending on the urgency, I
Mm-hmm.
guess.
Did you feel like the Italian
Yeah.
company was a little bit more impersonal because of their slower communication as opposed to the
Um,
Dublin company?
yeah, probably it was they were more impersonal, but in a good way because they're a
Hmm.
very young, dynamic company.
Ah.
And also, once they called me, they were very friendly and
Mm.
open-minded. So it was nice to talk to them. So they caught my attention again with it. So it was just a mistake that happened.
Okay.
But while the other company was colder and you never had a person contacting you over 4 different steps, and you were always it was everything was digital. So
Ah.
I prefer to yeah just have a quick call and you get a feeling for the company a little bit.
I'm so glad you've
So
touched upon this. This is a very important point. So a phone over a phone conversation is much more
yeah,
personal and yeah.
it's more personal and you get an a first impression about the company and about the people. Of course, it's just a recruiter, but you can ask questions that perhaps you wouldn't ask in this standard interview because you don't have anybody to reach out right
Mm-hmm.
away, and you have a contact person, but it would take longer. And yeah, I don't know.
Mm-hmm. As the result, did you feel like the Italian company was even more personal in their approach to communication just because of the phone conversations as opposed to the
Yeah,
Dublin
yeah,
company?
definitely.
Okay, so
Yeah,
they made up for their previous
they made up
mistakes.
for it. Yeah.
Okay, okay, perfect. Thank you. Final question about this portion of the interview.
Yeah.
How has the crisis, I mean the virus, affected your
Mhm.
job hunting and application process, excluding the interviews?
Yeah, they didn't. It didn't affect the job hunting part because this was before the
Mm.
outbreak of the
Mm-hmm.
of coronavirus.
Mm-hmm.
However, it affected also not the first step of the application part, but just the last one. So basically, both on-site interviews had to take place, yeah, over Zoom or
Mm-hmm.
other apps. This was the only difference. So I
Okay.
never met them in person as was planned to, but despite that, I think the rest was supposed to be online anyways. So
Mm-hmm.
not much
Okay.
different.
So
Yeah.
moving on to the second portion, which is all about interviews, assessments.
Hmm.
Could you describe your experience? I know you've already touched upon it a little bit. So
Yeah.
basically, what happened?
The experience of the second part in the interviews then.
Interviews and assessments. I think you've mentioned you had a.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. So I mean the Dublin process was quite more complex and took also way longer than the other process. So I had numeric logical test online, which was yeah, where you're also under time pressure, of course, and you have to solve different tasks, which was quite stressful. And you could prepare for it in advance. They would provide you with some websites. And yeah, so this was the second step. The third one was this video interview where basically you're talking to the computer and the person is talking to you. So they would just give you some quick information what you need to talk about, and then you just answer within a limited time to the computer, which felt for me quite weird because it was the first time to do things like this, and you feel the pressure and you have to say everything, but you don't. If you have somebody in front of you, you know how the person reacts, and you can adapt a little bit or see if people like what you're saying. And there it's just you, and it's a very impersonal as well.
So that was for Dublin.
That was for Dublin, exactly. And yeah, I mean the last part was over, like, was a Zoom interview where I had to present my case study, which was also weird because you're basically presenting to a computer, and it's not the same as presenting on site. So it was a bit limited because of coronavirus. And talking about the Italian interview, it was just like a simple interview, a Skype interview in this case, with the recruiter and the supply chain manager. And this was, it was a great experience. It was a normal interview, just that it took place via the internet.
So just to summarize, the process for the Italian company was just CV plus letter and then Skype interview?
Exactly.
And then for the Dublin company was CV, the letter, then the numeric test, then the video pre-recorded answers.
Yeah.
And then
video
one-on-one.
interview and then exactly the case study, and then interview.
The case study. The case study.
But it was like case study and interview at the same time.
Okay. Were you given any time for preparation for the case study?
Yes, I had, I think, a week time to prepare the case study, and then prepare the presentation. I had to send them. They sent the presentation beforehand, and then I just presented the presentation. They asked me questions related to the presentation, and then some competency-based or technical questions as well.
Okay, perfect. Makes sense. How did you prepare for these assessments and these interviews, all of those steps?
So I think I prepared better for the Dublin interview because they provided me with more information how you're supposed to answer a competency-based question. For example, you have to use the STAR method. So I would prepare some situations at home and reflect more about my personality, about my strengths, my weaknesses, whatever was required. And they provide you with specific websites, and also internal presentations, so you would know exactly what. So I think they provided more information. It was more transparent. And for I think the Italian company, they didn't require from you to have so much experience. It was a more easygoing interview. They just wanted to get to know your personality a lot, your experience, your expectations, but they didn't follow a strict guideline in this case.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. So was it more difficult to prepare for the Italian interview then, or?
No, of course it was more difficult to prepare for the Dublin process, of course. And I mean, while preparing for the Dublin process, I prepared for the other one at the same time, despite that I had to think about or take into consideration that these are different companies, but it was still in the same industry. The positions are both in supply chain management, so it was kind of overlapping. So I just need to prepare for one and change some minor details. But but the Dublin process was way more demanding.
Yeah. So
Okay.
although it was much more demanding, am I correct in my understanding that the fact that they provided to you with all
Yeah,
those sources was extremely helpful?
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Okay.
It was very, very helpful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Perfect. Again, a question about expectations. So what did you expect from those assessment and interviews, and were those expectations met? In terms of
Yeah,
expectations,
talking.
anything that pops into your head? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So regarding the Italian process, I think my expectations were mostly met. It was a very short process. I expected to have a second interview, which was not the case. So that was I mean, it was good because I got the offer finally. But usually you would always have an initial interview or like a screening with a recruiter, and the second part you have the more technical question. But this was a combined interview.
Mm-hmm.
And in view of the Dublin process, I never had such a long process, I must admit, because it was for a traineeship. So I think the competition is quite high, and therefore I think they just go for these different steps because they really want to get to know your personality
Mm-hmm.
and don't waste much time with personal interactions, I guess. First of all,
Mm-hmm.
that's why you go through three steps, digital steps, where they just try to understand who you are and um, what are your competences and whatever, and then they want to get to know you personally.
Mm-hmm.
um, so in this case I managed it to all the three first steps, and the last one I got rejected, but that's all
Mm-hmm.
right.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
It was a long way
Um,
to go.
it wasn't,
Yeah.
yeah. I guess the Italian company was indeed a better fit. So they
Yeah,
sound lovely in terms of their ways of communication and stuff like that.
yeah.
What differences do you see between traditional ways of assessing people and interviewing them, so face-to-face interviews, as opposed to the assessments and interviews that you went through online?
Can you repeat the question? So you want to know the difference between a traditional
Yeah,
um, process and the
and the
on-site
process
one,
that
or
you had, yes.
um, okay. I mean, in this case, I think it was there was not much difference.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I mean, if I consider the coronavirus, of course, the corona made it impossible to have the personal on-site interview.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, I think it was like any other process I went through before.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it would mostly be online, especially if you're like you have a lot of remote calls because you probably are not in this country. So it
Mm-hmm.
happened to me also other times that the whole process was
Online.
online. So yeah,
Ah,
so
okay.
I was used to it. So it was not a big issue for me.
Okay, yeah.
Although I prefer to meet people in person, to get a feeling about the dynamic of the company. That's very
Mm-hmm.
important for me as well.
To sort
Yeah,
of get a glimpse of what their culture, inner culture is like, and
exactly.
yeah.
Can I interrupt you? I just only have 1% of.
Oh,
Does it
sure.
take? Yeah.
Okay. So you said that you didn't really see any differences, especially because you're kind of used to the whole process being held online, but you do prefer sort of to go to the company to see how things are inside.
Exactly. So I would like to get a feeling about the
Mm-hmm.
company, but yeah. However, as you said, I mean, I'm used to it also, so
Mm-hmm.
it's fine
Okay. Okay.
both ways.
How would you evaluate the tools used in the process, both for the assessment and the interviews?
Um, I mean, the talent company, they didn't use many tools, I would say, because it was a simple application over the website and the internet, and
Skype.
the call was over Skype, if I
Mm-hmm.
don't remember.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was over Skype. Um, while the other company was way more advanced in terms of tools they used, um, starting from this numerical logical testing. So they had their, I think, like a company which they worked with, so they provided them this service.
Mm-hmm.
Same one for the video interview, and for the interview call, I think they used Team Link.
Mm-hmm. So
But
were they all very easy to use?
definitely, yeah, it
Mm-hmm.
was easy to use, well described. So they would always provide you with respective information beforehand.
Uh-huh.
So and indeed, like the company in Dublin, they really provided a lot of information um, before every step of the process.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Okay. Am I correct in my assumption that, mm, sorry, lost my trail of thought for a second, that
Don't worry.
although all of the tools for the Dublin company were so easy to use, you still preferred the Italian company just because there were less steps?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it was a long process to go, which is very time consuming.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I do understand that they need a lot of information before they hire you, because they would invest a lot in you. Like for 2 years, they would yeah, give you the information, like the education, and yeah, you have a mentor on your side and whatever. So I think
Mm-hmm.
this one was more professional, and
Uh-huh.
they also want to give you a full-time position afterwards. So I think they put more effort in their application. So
Mm-hmm.
for me, it's understandable that
Mm-hmm.
application is more exhausting, let's say.
Yeah,
um,
I understand.
but yeah, but it was very professional. It took a bit longer due to the coronavirus, because they didn't know if they can have the last interview on site or remote, and they had to change a lot to make it suitable to be an online interview.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, but I think they did well. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I was happy with both processes, let's say. But of course, the other one, I think it's not much about the process, but it's also about the vibes of the company.
Uh-huh.
So I think the other one was just a younger, more dynamic, fresh company, and I could feel that. And so I was also very interested in this company from the beginning. And I also have to say, I considered more the Italian company, given the fact that it was in the middle of the crisis when I had both interviews. So it was I was in I moved back to Italy at that time. There's no great predictions how this thing will evolve. So I thought it would be also safer decision to stay within my country, because I didn't know if I could leave my country afterwards. So this is why I also opted more for the Italian company.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you felt like you were a great fit for the Italian company in terms of their values, how dynamic, how young they are. It was just a good match.
Yeah, I think so too, because
Mm-hmm.
they're like a very, as I said, very young and innovative and
Mm-hmm.
dynamic company. And I used to work in different startups,
Mm-hmm.
so I think that's me as a person. I would fit there, while the other company was very traditional, um, yeah, cold, and they had their rules, and yeah, it just seemed
Yeah.
less dynamic, and it was so traditional. So
That's an
I,
interesting word you used, cold. You've mentioned that the Dublin company felt a little bit more impersonal because everything was just digitally. You never spoke with them on the phone.
yeah.
Did it feel the same way during the interviews and the assessment process? Was it more impersonal?
Yeah, I mean, during the first 3 steps, I wouldn't say in person. I mean, you didn't had a direct contact person, so
Uh-huh.
you were basically talking to the computer or
Mm-hmm.
doing tasks on the computer. But I think that's all right.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of it. But only in terms of the final interview. So the recruiters or the managers that I was talking to, they transmitted a feeling about the company, and at this point, I understood that I would fit better in the Italian company, and
Mm.
yeah.
how did they
So
transmit that feeling? Were they not as friendly or anything
um
else?
y- yeah, I mean, no, they were friendly and everything,
Mhm.
but I could understand from their behavior. There were managers who were in their positions for already 20 years.
Mhm.
Mm, and I think it's if you're in the same position for 20 years, you're working, you're acting differently than a person who's working there for 4 or 5 years.
Uh-huh.
This is maybe one difference. Another one is also the age of the managers. While the supply chain manager from the Italian company was around 30, 35, and um, also a funny character. The other ones, they were barely laughing. It was very strict, so they were very focused on my competences, and but less about my personality, let's say.
Mhm. Okay, that makes sense. Also, did you feel some people feel like body language plays a really huge part of the way we
Mm,
communicate in interviews and the overall success of the
yeah.
interviews? Did you feel like body language or nonverbal cues were um, an issue for you during any of those interviews?
Yeah, that's a funny question because Italians they like to use the body language a lot,
Yeah, yeah.
or let's say more than other countries.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, comparing those, of course, the managers in Dublin they were barely moving; they were just sitting in their chairs and
Yeah,
standing still for an entire hour.
yeah,
Um, I think also if I remember, not even their hands were moving in any in
yeah,
any way. Well, of course, Italians they use their arms and hands more
yeah,
than any
yeah.
other um, culture. So, but I also think it's like you feel more engaged in the conversation.
Yeah, when they use a little bit more of body language.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, what about that pre-recorded interview and the team meeting? Did
Mhm.
they feel, what was your reaction towards those sort of interviews in general?
Um, I mean, I never did it before, so it was a new experience for me.
Mm-hmm.
But they provided me with a website where I could, yeah, with some samples, so you have an idea how it works, um, how you're supposed to prepare. I mean, you
Mm-hmm.
cannot prepare because you don't know what kind of questions will be asked.
Mm-hmm.
However, you know more or less how much time you have, and you can just try it beforehand and exercise a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
However, it's a very weird feeling. I mean, I don't like to have 3 minutes and then just talk, because
Yeah.
sometimes you don't. If you just have to fill the gap, yeah, they will understand. And on the other hand, sometimes you have more to say, but you have to. Yeah, cut it down and say the most important things, which
Mm-hmm.
of course I think they will understand a lot about your, if you're capable to be spontaneous, to I think they understand a lot about your personality by doing so.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't mean that it's the most comfortable way for the person that applies to the job.
Yeah. So,
But
mm-hmm.
you know, I just think that considering both perspectives, I mean, also from the perspective of the company, it's understandable why they're doing it, and I think it's also it makes sense.
Mm-hmm. So, what made it less enjoyable, that format of the interview? Do you think it was the time pressure, or was it also because there was no, like, it was very impersonal again? Um,
I mean, of course, it was impersonal. I
mm-hmm,
think that was less the problem for me. It was more about
mm-hmm,
the time, because you
mm-hmm,
would be very excited knowing that you get a question, you can read through it, you know, like 20 seconds, and then you have to talk, or 20 seconds to think, make some notes, and then you have to talk. And yeah, it's just a different dynamic. Uh, but I think in this case, it's probably not too much about having a person in front of you or not, because it would be the same if there was a person
Yeah.
asking me the question, giving me 20 seconds, and then letting me talk.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a dialogue; it's a monologue that you're
Mm-hmm.
doing,
So
and
mostly the
therefore
time
this
pressure.
wouldn't make the difference anymore.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so the issue was mostly the time pressure in that
Yeah.
case. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
You've also mentioned that you felt like the Dublin company was cold. You didn't really fit in terms of their culture. How did they? What made you feel like you wouldn't fit in? What was it specifically?
Probably, I mean, I did my research beforehand, and I knew it was a very old traditional company.
Mm-hmm.
So I had my doubts, or however I applied because it was an interesting position, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you have to try sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but then, of course, you get a feeling for it, and doesn't mean they weren't nice. So we had a nice conversation, and but I think, yeah, they also were not much interested in me as a person.
Mm-hmm.
I did my presentation. They asked me competency
Mm-hmm.
question, but they didn't know anything about who I was. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that this at least as important as your skills that you're bringing, because
Mm-hmm.
if you don't fit in a team, everything can go wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it was a very important factor, that they considered that if I if I'm a suitable person for the team. And I feel that this was not an important aspect. This also showed me that it's a very um, old-fashioned, traditionally thinking company, because I
Mm-hmm.
know future-oriented and innovative companies, they consider this aspect much more. And because I know, working as a team, if you're working together in a good way, you can reach much more than, yeah, if the team is just not yeah, if they just don't
Working
fit together.
collaboratively. Mm-hmm.
Mm,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Okay, thank you. How could companies improve your experience with online interviews and assessments? You've mentioned key factors such as communication,
Mm,
uh, them not only focusing on your competencies, but also on yourself. So that's
yeah.
like personalization factor. You've also mentioned the overall length of all the steps.
Yeah,
Anything else? Mm-hmm.
I mean, these are three very important key factors that arose within this process.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of the length, of course, sometimes it's necessary, but if you're going through all this process and then they reject you, you just like lost a lot of time, because it was very time consuming, of course.
Yeah.
Then communication, it's if they keep you informed throughout the whole process, um, it just makes you feel there is somebody who cares about you. And um, even if you had another process at the same time, consider this process probably as well, if
Mm-hmm.
they inform you constantly. And yeah, of course,
Mm-hmm.
communication. And then the personal aspect, yeah, it's yeah, this is also like an important point. But despite these three, for now, I wouldn't, I don't have anything to criticize at this point.
Okay.
And I think, yeah, that's it at the moment.
Mm-hmm. We only have a couple of questions left, so you're doing really great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Um, some people have mentioned that the fact that they don't have to, get dressed for the interview, spend all the time on getting to the place, also plays a huge factor for some people in terms of them
Mhm.
perceiving it as a better option as opposed to face-to-face interviews and assessments. How do you feel
Yeah.
about it? Does it play any role to you?
So I think for me it wouldn't be a problem because you can take a couple of hours to go to this place and
Mm-hmm.
get dressed. And I think that shouldn't be the problem, because if
Yeah.
you go to work, you have to get dressed every morning.
Mm-hmm.
So there shouldn't be a reason why you prefer online interviews. However, it can be more convenient for specific situations, especially if the company is far away, or if
Mm-hmm.
it's if you need to travel to get to get to this place. It also sometimes means also spending money, spending too much time, and in this case, it's more convenient. But for me, I would say it depends on the situation where the company is located. Um, but yeah, I mean, I for the company in Italy, I was in Dublin, and when they invited me for the first interview, they wanted to have me as a person there. So I waited for 1 or 2 months until I was coming back to Italy because they wanted to get to know me in person. That was their wish, not mine. Because I was like, we can do the call over Skype because I was in Dublin, they were in Italy, but they preferred to wait. However, then Corona happened, and we had to do it online anyways.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay,
But
and
yeah,
the last question. How has the
yeah.
crisis affected your experience with online interviews and assessments in terms of your expectations, emotions that you have regarding that?
Okay, I think it didn't. I mean, it affected the process, but it didn't affect me much. The only thing is that it was getting worse and worse, and my thought was that maybe companies would reject you because they don't want to hire new people anymore. And but this was just one of my thoughts, but it didn't affect me emotionally because I was in the middle of the process. I had to go through it, but if uh yeah, maybe like I knew that probably a rejection could be related
Mm-hmm.
um to the coronavirus, because I heard from many other friends that their process, they were just frozen or stopped entirely because companies, they reconsidered their hiring
Mm-hmm.
um, process. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. I have to ask finally for the recording. You've mentioned that you do not have any experience with online orientation, online onboarding.
No, no, there was no online onboarding, and not in this process, but also not before.
Okay. Okay, I'll stop.